50 issues of the Marxist journal Critique. A good reason to celebrate the occasion in a London School of Economics seminar on February 27, 2010. The magazine was launched in 1973, originally to study the true nature of the Stalinist regimes in the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe, but it has since widened its remit.
We held a conference in May 1973, and there were about 500 people present, and the journal actually sold out very quickly. We printed 2,500. It sold out very quickly to our surprise. Our impression, because we originally came from a study of the Soviet Union, was that most of what was written contemporarily on the Soviet Union wasn't worth the paper it was actually written on. It simply adopted a particular viewpoint without any actual knowledge. So what we derived from studying the Soviet Union was a more profound understanding about Stalinism, I think, and that has tended to inform more generally our understanding of the left, of the nature of societies in Europe or America, or anywhere in the world for that matter, the particular negative role of the Communist parties, the importance of a genuine social society as opposed to the awful nature of the Soviet Union.
My involvement with Critique started about 12 years ago, and of course even before that I was reading Critique because for those of us who were involved in the Iranian left, the issue of Soviet Union was very important, and Critique was the only journal that dealt theoretically with issues regarding politics, economy, the political economy of the Soviet Union and Eastern European countries. So it was inevitable that I became involved in the journal.
Critique was the only journal saying that the Soviet Union could not reform itself and it would crack up. And they're saying that from the early 1980s onwards. And I can remember when almost everybody else on the far left that I was speaking to thought that this was absolute nuts. I didn't believe a word of it, and yet it happened.
The problem which arose in the Soviet Union was that they could fix any target simply by altering the rules. So the famous example was setting a target of 1,000 nails to be produced. The obvious thing to do to make it easy for everybody was to produce one one-ton nail, as it were, so just one nail, which did the same job. Well, the same thing happens in the West, and we've just seen what happened in the case of a hospital where the people fulfilled the targets but killed the patients. In the case of socialism, apart from the more general principle that you would reduce manual labor of a routine kind to the absolute minimum, there would be two ways which would be different. Firstly, people would be working to their best because they actually enjoyed the work. You would have to find work of that kind as far as possible. And secondly, they would be doing it because they would regard the society as their own, and what they would be doing for mankind as a whole as well as for themselves.
Critique has influenced me, I think, in a whole number of actual different ways, but I think that in terms of the writings on the Soviet Union, they were the most important to begin with. But quite clearly, in terms of Hillel's writings in particular on the decline of capitalism, I think it's absolutely profound development in terms of Marxism.
The editors of Critique argue that the economic crisis is, in fact, a systemic crisis, reflecting the worldwide decline of capitalism.
We are living, in a sense, between two crises, and I don't think it is at all ruled out that there will be another major financial crisis over the next 6 to 8 months or 12 months. Where it will happen is going to be interesting. The likely port of call for the next major crisis is going to be Euroland and Eurozone, because Europe is being squeezed very, very badly through this crisis, as we can see.
Finance capital is itself necessarily short-termist. It therefore demands that industry be short-termist. It therefore demands a particular way of running industry, which amounts to a really crazy way of running industry. That's to say, getting the maximum out of every person who actually is working in industry under enormous stress. Obviously, a situation where people have to work under such levels of tension and stress is not sustainable over long periods of time. this particular way of running capitalism, which isn't just a question of finance, but actually running industry itself, has virtually burnt itself out. They can't continue in that way. They couldn't continue in controlling the third world countries as they had done before. It seems to me it's reached its limits within the industry, it's reached its limits within capital as a whole. It's not just a question of a bubble, but it's a question of capitalism itself having reached the end of this particular strategy of using finance capital as an alternative. The result is that it has to find a new form. It doesn't have a new form. The result is that it must muddle. That is what it's doing. It's trying to muddle through on short-termist basis. This itself cannot work. It can only work on a short-term basis. So we can expect a long-distance period of capitalism muddling, succeeding for short periods, and then going down again. That seems to me what the future is. Thank you.
Very good.